Welcome everybody to Tales from the Jar Side, the video series, the video where I get a chance to read my newsletter to you and make other random comments and jokes and so on. The title this week is Tales from the Jar Side, Setting Up Mockito, Reacting to Spring, and Tweets and Toots. And the subtitle is Thieves Stole 20 Cases of Red Bull from My Supermarket. I don't know how those people sleep at night. Now, normally I would throw in a rim shot right here, and I went to my site that I use for that called instantrimshot.com, and the site was down. Now, this is actually a metaphor for what happened to me this week, but let's see if I can reload it. Nope, still not happening. So I found another one. There we go. So again, that will tie into some of the commentary this week. Welcome, fellow Jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of February 19th through 26th, 2023. My name is Ken Cousin. I'm your host, if you will. This week, I taught my Reactive Spring course on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, and that turned out to be a more interesting experience than I had intended. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as Jarheads, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a Jarhead, please subscribe using the button either in the newsletter and the one on the YouTube channel. I'll go to the YouTube channel shortly. In fact, let me show this to you now. I'm going to need it a little bit later. And here is the YouTube channel, and you see that has a subscribe button and a bell and everything as well. So I'll come back to that. Another new thing I have this week is I actually have a little bit of a video introduction. So let me shift to that for a moment, 5 seconds, and then I'll be right back. Okay, that was fun. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'm still learning this stuff, as you can see. So, the first section is on my new video on setting up Mockito projects. So, I published a video which was called Setting Up a Mockito Project. I have it embedded in the newsletter. Of course, you'll find it on the YouTube channel. However, if you look at this, let me magnify this a bit, you'll actually see that I have two versions of this video on the YouTube channel. So let me explain what the whole point of that was. As with many of my videos these days, it's pretty obvious I'm still going through the learning curve. You can see in the image that at least now I can create what they call a thumbnail. That's the image on the front here, which doesn't look too bad. It's got the little logo up here. I even got to put myself in as a little bit of a making a little face, my expression or whatever, and I'll continue to try to do stuff like that, which I can do by taking a picture and adding it to the thumbnail. And if you watch the video, if you play it at all, you'll find there's another feature, which is I put in some background music. There are many services that offer that sort of royalty-free music, either as a subscription service or sometimes for free. YouTube itself actually offers a whole bunch of music that you can use in the background. I decided to use a song from my son's former band, which is called The Tension, and the band only lasted long enough to make one album, but I love it. The truly awesome album called The Rest Can Wait, which you could find on various services, but has also, I don't know who did this, but somebody uploaded it to YouTube. And here it is. There's the link in the newsletter. I'll also add it to the description. But you could see all the songs are there one by one. You could play the whole thing if you choose to. And of course, it's all free. So feel free if you're interested. I wanted to use some of those songs, and I've always wanted to find a use for them in this anyway. So I didn't want to put a song with vocals as background music. I thought that might be a bit too distracting. So last week I stumbled across a site called Vocal Remover. That's this site right here. And it supposedly uses some AI algorithm, to remove the vocals from it, some sort of bandpass filter, I imagine. And you could browse your files and upload your MP3 and it will remove the vocals from it if you want. So I tried that. And of course, that when I was writing it, my thought was, I wonder what would happen if I uploaded my a cappella song, the one in the Tales from the Jarside video here, the one called 7-part Ave Maria from Franz Biebel. That one is still done very well in terms of plays, but it's a cappella. So I wonder what would happen if I uploaded it to a vocal remover site. Would it remove everything? Would there be nothing left? And I just made this somewhat of a gag to say it's an existential problem, so I'm a little afraid to try it. So at any rate, I removed the vocals from one of the songs on the album, and then I put it in the background of my Mockito video. And I know that they say, cut the volume way down, and however low you think it is, make it lower than that. So I cut it down to about 15% volume. And it worked, except that my video is approximately 8 minutes long, and the song is just over 6 minutes long. So that leaves a couple minutes left. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just add it again. I just added another copy. But what I forgot to do on the copy is also lower the volume on that one too. So it turns out you have to do it on each of them. And what happens, therefore, is that when I published it and didn't play through the whole thing before I did that, I didn't realize it jumped back to 100%. So the last couple minutes are really awkward. And as soon as I played it, I went, oh, wow, that's wrong. So I did go back and cut the volume down and made it fade out and everything the way I did that originally. I made it fade out, so I did that right. But then I was going to replace the existing video with that one and found that like a few people had already watched it or already listened to it, and I didn't want to throw them off. Plus, I'd already tweeted the proper link and everything. I'd already posted the link to the video. So I thought, well, I'll just publish it again and maybe it'll replace the existing one. And there was no way for me to know that until I did it. And of course, it didn't. YouTube is more than happy to have 2 copies of the video under separate URLs. So I wound up, that's where I have them now. And you can see them on here, as I mentioned. There's this Setting Up Mockito, which is the one that actually has the fixed video on it, fixed audio rather. And then there's this second one, and one of them has a couple, like 22 views and one has 19. I mean, not huge numbers, but still they're split roughly evenly. So I don't feel I can get rid of them. I'll just leave them up there, I guess, and I'll do better next time. So I went on Mastodon and I put up my little post here saying, still figuring out this YouTube stuff. As the saying goes, good judgment comes from experience, but experience comes from bad judgment. I'm still firmly in the making mistakes phase, but my small audience is pretty forgiving so far. And that's true. Now, that phrase I've always liked, that good judgment comes from experience and experience comes from bad judgment, has been attributed to various people over the years. So I went to Google figuring, what the heck, good judgment comes from experience. And someone attributed it to some doctor. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And then somebody said, no, it's a Will Rogers quote. And then I'm like, really? I'm not sure it's a Will Rogers quote. And somebody said Mark Twain. And then they said, no, it comes from Rita Mae Brown. Which really, isn't that interesting? So I really don't know exactly where it came from. I mean, they have this site which tries to identify it, and they're claiming in this site that it's the Muncie Evening Press of Muncie, Indiana, published it in 1932 and gave a name there, but I mean, who knows? So at any rate, there's the link if you're interested. This was in quoteinvestigator.com. So I didn't do that for the newsletter. So there's your extra feature for dropping by and listening to the video. Way back when I was writing fiction in the early days, it was in the early 90s when I didn't like my job and I thought I'd try to be a fiction writer instead. One of the phrases I remember seeing many times was the first million words of practice. And I'm taking the same attitude with these videos if I can. I said maybe the first dozen or so videos of practice, but then I saw somebody actually say like the first 100 videos of practice, and I hope that's not true. It's going to take me a while to get the hang of this, but oh well. So the advantage of having a small audience is there aren't too many people to get upset with my mistakes, and most of them have more important things to do than worry about my errors, so they don't seem to care that much. And what the heck, I'll just mentally add those numbers together and see what we can do. Now, if I can only figure out how to get a decent subscribe button with a transparent background, I've tried several variations. I don't like any of them. Okay. Next section. Reacting to reactive spring. Now, I taught my reactive spring course this week, and I made another blunder. So this week I'm talking about my mistakes, but what the heck. Let me give you the intro here. Periodically, I teach a course on reactive spring. Reactive is the term they use to mean asynchronous, things happening at different times, which is the opposite of synchronous, which means blocking. We make a call and we wait. I often describe it this way. Say you go out to lunch at a fast food restaurant, and you go up to the cashier, and you put in your order, and the cashier sends it to the kitchen. And then if the restaurant was perfectly synchronous or blocking, you both would just stand there until your lunch was delivered. When your lunch was complete, the cashier would hand you your lunch, and then you could get out of line and they could handle the next order behind you. And obviously that doesn't scale very well. So if we had 4 customers and 2 cashiers or 3 cashiers, the whole restaurant's blocked until each lunch is made. Now, that's obviously not how fast food restaurants really work. Instead, what happens is when you put in your order, you get back a receipt with a number on it. And the number on it is your callback, if you will. So that once you have that allows 2 things to happen. One is you can get out of line and prepare for your lunch to arrive. Like you can get a table, you can go grab a drink, you can take off your jacket, whatever you need to do. And likewise, the cashier, of course, can then take orders from everybody else. And this is all important because it takes far less time to take in an order and submit it than it does to make your actual lunch. So synchronous would mean that the restaurant is blocked on I/O, and asynchronous means that you get this callback and you've got to keep an eye out for when your number is called. Either they say it out loud or it's on a monitor or something like that. In some places they'll bring it to you, but it's no longer blocking. It's no longer waiting for a response. So that does make life a bit more complicated. You got to pay attention. Also, errors can be a little bit harder to connect because you've got to connect it to the original order and everything. But it is much more efficient. It scales better. The cashiers are no longer blocked on I/O, or as I said, 3 cashiers can handle the entire lunch rush if they're good at it. So the Spring Framework, again, is something I spent a lot of time with. It's one of the most popular server-side open source projects in the Java world for building applications that are both synchronous and asynchronous. And they have a module called WebFlux for doing asynchronous applications. The design is pretty clean and straightforward, but I always want to emphasize that just because you can write the code pretty simply doesn't make asynchronous simple. Asynchronous is always a little hard to wrap your head around. But this week I taught my class on it, on Reactive Spring. And none of the complexity I just described has anything to do with the problem I ran into. What happened is that nothing in the IT world stays the same for very long. So I have like 5 exercises that I do with the students, in order to save time in that course. And I opened up my exercise list, and even though I'd updated Spring in the GitHub repository just to make sure everything was running properly, I didn't really look at the code and I didn't look at the exercises until I got into class and discovered that, oh no, my first 2 of those 5 exercises is accessing a RESTful web service that no longer works. Just like my instant rim shot didn't work today. So the service I'm trying to access, both first synchronously and then asynchronously, is down. Now I have a workaround for that, and I've actually updated my regular Spring course to use a different service that works just fine. But here we were right in class, and I couldn't just change the materials on the fly, so we had to walk through how to do it ourselves. Unfortunately, I know what I'm doing on that, so it was doable, but unfortunately I wasn't able to give the exercise to the students, so I'm going to have to update it afterwards. Then I go to, so that's what this one was about. Then I went to the last 3 exercises. So that's the database exercise and then make a controller in front of it. only to discover that, of course, Spring has changed to Spring 6 and Spring Boot 3. And I wanted to use that in class just to show what the newer capabilities were. And then I found out that the database driver I use isn't supported yet in Spring Boot 2 or 3 rather, Spring 6. I'm like, oh no. So what was I going to do then? Well, I couldn't rewrite that exercise on the fly, but instead what I did is I backed off to Spring Boot 2, the latest one in the Spring Boot 2 version, which of course fit what most people are using in practice anyway, and therefore did the exercise that way. The thing that bugged me though is, of course, if I had paid any attention when I was going over doing my prep for the course, I would have noticed all this ahead of time, but I didn't. I missed it, because I've taught the course many times and I figured everything was fine. So, all right, when am I going to update the materials? Well, when am I teaching this course the next time? And according to the O'Reilly platform, it's on the schedule for April. So I figured I had a couple of months. Then I looked at my calendar in preparation for this recording. What am I teaching next week? And discovered, oh, good. For the No Fluff people, for No Fluff Just Stuff, I have a very similar course that uses some of those same exercises Tuesday, tomorrow, actually. And therefore, I've spent a fair amount of time over the weekend and today updating my materials to work with the new versions and using R2 DBC, and I'll probably talk about some of that next week. Okay, thank goodness I checked my calendar. This week would have been an adventure as well. Next section, let's just do our tweets and toots this week. Be a little bit shorter than normal, but I don't think anybody will mind. So I saw this post on Mastodon, and I'll just read it to you. It's one of the critics from The Muppet Show saying how to frighten the new generation, put them in a room with a rotary phone, an analog watch, and a TV with no remote, then leave directions on how to use them in cursive. And of course, I had to throw in, you might also ask them to fix the grammar on that image because there were a couple of issues there. Yeah, okay. I mean, I grew up with a phone with a cord on it and everything, and I had an analog watch for many, many years. Then I had a digital one, but I didn't like it, so I mostly stuck with the analog one. The thing about an analog watch is you can glance at it and get a sense of how much time you have until the top of the hour or the bottom of the hour. It's very helpful that way. I don't wear a watch at all anymore. Eventually, there'll be a Google Watch or an Android watch and I don't use the iPhone stuff as much. Maybe I'll grab an Apple Watch at some point. Who knows? But not yet. Anyway, I thought that was fairly clever. Oh, the TV with no remote. Yeah, that's what kids are for, right? It's for the parents to send the kids to change the channel. And directions on how to use them in cursive, right? I mean, I remember having to learn all that as a kid in elementary school, but yeah, okay. Speaking of being old, I loved this little post here that said, I've become old enough to realize that Walter Peck from the EPA was 100% right to try to regulate the Ghostbusters storage containment unit. Obviously, that's the original Ghostbusters movie, and Walter Peck from the EPA was a villain, and they made fun of him and everything. And really funny. And yeah, it is kind of horrible realizing that he had a point. Now, he still made a blunder. The blunder was just shutting it off without knowing what was going to happen. Obviously, that was the disaster. And that caused all the problems and then denying it was his fault. But they were running an unlicensed, unverified storage containment unit, which was highly toxic and dangerous. Yeah. Still, fun movie. I still like it. Okay, then this earworm. Spelling bee, Judge, your word is bird. And then me, nothing. And then Judge, bird is the word. Me, nothing. And then it kicks into the song. Bird is the word. Pa, 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 pa. Uma, mau, mau, pa, pa, uma, mau. Buzzer. Sound, Judge, incorrect. Now, I'm kind of curious as to how many people are going to get that reference from the original song and how many people will get it because of the Family Guy episode that used it so much where Peter kind of fell in love with that song. And I put in the little YouTube video, which has, believe it or not, 87 million views on there. That's more than this video will get, probably by roughly 87 million views. So we'll see. But it was pretty funny, and be careful watching that video because then that song will be in your head for who knows how long. Next, chess cheating references for the win. So there hadn't been much in the news lately about Hans Niemann's lawsuit accusing Magnus Carlsen and others of defamation for implying he was cheating, but this was clever. So at the U.S. Amateur Teams Championship, they have an East Coast and a West one, everything. People always come up with clever names for their teams. They said, so I hear the winning team name at this year's U.S. Amateur Teams East was Hans Shoulders Niemann Toes. Which is pretty funny. I mean, obviously it's head, shoulders, Niemann, toes, not hands, but still very clever. But the reply was even better. It says there had to be a team called To Bead or Not To Bead, which was a reference to that ridiculous assertion that Hans used, well, let's just say some sort of vibrating beads to transmit moves to him from the computer, and I'm not getting into any more detail about that. Okay, this one isn't funny, right? It was a little website that said, how to keep your husband satisfied. Number 1, dress like a nurse so he can live with the ultimate fantasy of pretending he has health care. Wait a minute. Yep, that definitely needed a rim shot. Some of you may remember, if you're a long-time jarhead here, that about a year ago, I spent a week in the hospital, if you can believe it. That's been almost a year. That was the second week in March, which is the only time in the past 4 years I've actually missed publishing a newsletter. All I can say is my high-deductible medical plan did its job. It doesn't pay for much at all, but once it kicks in, it did the job. In fact, when they did further tests later in the year, this heart catheterization thing, which are not two words you ever want to hear together, I told the surgeon my deductible is already paid. So if they want to take the opportunity to remove 20 pounds of fat, it's okay with that. I'm already there, fine with me, but they didn't do it. So, and I'm fine, by the way. Don't worry about me. Okay, finally, a pun in poor taste, which is also a pun. Says some people say it's impossible to make a pun about vegetables, but it ain't necessarily so. Oh my goodness. That's the ain't necessarily so is from Porgy and Bess. The other Porgy and Bess song I know is Summertime. That's what most people know. Where the growing is easy of the veggies, I know. Wait, rim shot. Yeah. So that wasn't a great pun, and I was thinking I should put in some lyrics from Summertime with vegetable puns in it, and nothing was coming to mind. So I went to ChatGPT and asked them to do it. Asked the tool to do it. I said, do you know the lyrics to Summertime? And it said, sure, and it spat them out. And I said, okay, give me the lyrics to Summertime with vegetable puns in it. And here they are, and I'll just tell you one of them. Summertime and the garden is thriving. Zucchini's growing and the kale is high. Oh, your farmer's market hall is quite impressive. So hush, little baby, don't you fry. Okay, that was pretty good. At any rate, there's a whole series of them if you want. I wanted to tell the ChatGPT not to give up its day job, but neither should I, right? Pot, kettle, black, all of that. I should make a joke about pickles, just to throw something in there vegetable related. I guess that's a vegetable. At any rate, maybe something about how pickles are delivered, but that would be too jarring. See, Tales from the Jar Side. Back to the end of the cucumber for me, and such a dilemma. Oh man, that doesn't even deserve a rim shot, but I'm going to do it anyway, and I put a couple of veggies in there. As a reminder, you can see all my upcoming training classes on the O'Reilly Learning Platform at this link right here, which looks like this. There's all my courses. I did once at some time resemble some of those pictures. And you can see my No Fluff, Just Stuff virtual workshops. On the regular virtual workshop page, there's my Reactive Spring one coming up this week. So I've got also my new Java features, Making New Java Features Work for You course on O'Reilly. And I hope you have a really good week. And thank you very much for your attention and for listening. Take care, everybody.